Hey guys, and welcome back. In this video I'm going to be comparing 3 different generations of Golf. We've got them all lined up just behind the camera, so I'm going to introduce you to them. First of all, we've got this Mk4 GTI. This is my own car, my day-to-day driver. Introduced in 1997, I believe. The Mk4 Golf ran until 2004, and it came in many different trim levels. The majority of them were like C and CE. But the top levels were GTI, Anniversary and R32. This is a GTI, has a 1.8 turbo engine running about 150 brake horsepower, and yeah, we'll move on. So next up we've got this T-Reg Mk3 Golf variant in it's an estate. Mk3 Golfs were introduced in 1993 and ran until about 2000. You could get them in soft tops, you could get them in the Vento, which is the newer style of the Jetta category, obviously in the standard Golf, and with this variant estate. Came with many different engines. This is where the VR6 was very first introduced into the Golf lineup. It was just called the Golf VR6, obviously then became the Golf R32. You can get these with 2 different GTI engines in them. You can get an 8-valve GTI or a 16-valve ABF engine in it. This one does only have the 1.6 carbureted petrol engine, which is a carryover from the Mk2. Actually the same engine I've got in my Jetta, slightly different. And yeah, really excited to hopefully do a review on this one in the next coming week or so. But yeah, we'll move on to the next car. Okay guys, and finally we've got my project Mk2 Golf. Get the stick off it. What we've got here is a 1985 Mk2 Golf. They introduced Mk2 Golfs in 1983, and for the first few years they were called the Type 19 variant. What the differences really were that they had left-hand drive wipers, they had quarter windows, and then therefore further back wing mirrors. They had small bumpers on them, and the indicator stalks were a little bit skinnier, and the badges on the back, rather than being in the centre, were offset. When it came to like 88, 89, they moved to the later spec, or the 90 spec Mk2 Golf, which in GTI and GL fashion had big bumpers. It had a central badge on the back. It moved to CE2 electric, so a slightly more updated electric system in the car, and other little bits and pieces had been moved around. They'd finally realised to put the wipers on the right way, that sort of thing. You could get loads of different engines in Mk2 Golfs, from a little 1 litre, which a lot of people didn't know existed in the first year of production. You could get a 1 litre Mk2 Golf, all the way up to a 1.8 GTI engine, 16 valve. And then special editions included the Rally Golf with the boxed off square arches with a G60 supercharged engine in it, and also a very, very limited Golf called the Golf Limited, which was just a standard 4-door Golf but with a G60 engine in it, and they didn't make many of them at all, and now they sell for like 100 grand each. So yeah. As you can see, this is clearly the most modern of the 3. Makes sense because it's the newest, but they've completely departed from the sort of black plastic bumpers completely. Body colour here, lights are getting a lot more modern. You've got the indicators integrated to the lights now. The grille has got a lot smaller from the Mk2. You can see it's literally like half the size. As we come around the car, I want to say that everyone calls the Mk4 the fat Golf. I don't think it's that fat. I think it's just the right size for a modern daily. I think the Mk5 is the fat Golf. Last things really, round the back, I think it's got a much cleaner look. Obviously, after this generation, they integrated the boot handle into the badge. So that's like one of the last remnants of the Mk3. But all in all, I think that especially in GTI fashion, this is a very good looking car. So moving under the bonnet of the Mk4 Golf, so we'll talk a little bit about engines that came with these. It started with a small little inline 4 1.4, moved up to a 1.6, you had a 1.8 turbo in GTIs, that's this engine. A 2-litre inline 4, again in GTIs, but not very good. You had the VR5 and VR6 engines. The VR6, of course, was taken over from the Mk3, and then they locked the cylinder off to make the VR5. A bit strange. And then you had the R32 models as well. There were some diesels. They were all inline 4. There was the SDI non-turbo, very slow but very economical. And then you had all the PD engines, 110, 115, 130, and I think even 150 in these. The VR5, VR6 and R32 came with 4-wheel drive, or 4-motion, as Volkswagen like to call it. And these were available with 5-speed manual, 5-speed auto, 6-speed manual, and the 6-speed DSG for the first time in a Golf. Right, so the interior of the Mk4, if you've watched my other videos, I've said this 1,000 times, it's a lot more modern than Mk2s and 3s. They actually, finally have proper airbags in them, proper cup holders. God, this is what's missing from the Mk2 and 3. You can obviously get climate control, heated seats were a lot more common, and things like Recaro seats were available in the GTIs. That's what I've got here, leather Recaro seats. And all in all, it was just a nicer place to spend time. It wasn't as high quality, I don't think. I think that, I've got bits that have fallen off, and the plastics go all scratchy and horrible. But for a long drive, it is a nice, comfy place to be. Right, so the Mk4. Now, I know this is the first one I'm testing, but there isn't really much to say about it. It feels very modern. Obviously, it feels more modern than the 2 and the 3. Mine's a little bit loud just because I've got a hole in my downpipe at the moment, do apologise. For this as a daily driver, it's just absolutely no problems at all. I drive this 57 miles a day, absolutely no issue. Get in and drive. Having the cup holder is an amazing thing. Having the climate control is an amazing thing. Parts, obviously, very, very readily available. Everyone's just starting to scrap these now, as they are sort of at their lowest price point, unfortunately. So you need bits, there are bits everywhere. Like, I picked up a 4-motion rear splitter, posted on Facebook, next day had it done. Cheap as chips, lovely job. Buying them, okay, some of them are cheap, some of them are more expensive. You can get yourself a running driving one for under £1,000, absolutely no problem at all. You probably might not get a GTI for that, and if you do, it'll probably be the 2-litre one, which no one really wants. But there are a range of body styles. You can get Borers, you can get estates, you can get 1.8T estates. There's a lot to do, And if you want something that's gonna you can hold on to and make money on, then geez, R32s, they're 10 grand now. They're easily 10 grand cars. Black 3-door or blue 3-door R32, 10 grand cars. So if you're looking for something as an investment, then why would you not? I mean, this is before cars started going to digital. I feel like this is the last, maybe second to last of the more analog Golfs. With newer ones, they started to get all DSG. But no, with this, you can proper road through the gears, and the tuning potential on these 1.8Ts is just outstanding. One of the most tunable engines ever made. And there are bits everywhere. You need a bit for it, yeah, you can get one. Absolutely no problem at all. On to the Mk3. Here we are on the outside of the Mk3. You might notice I'm wearing a different t-shirt, I'm wearing a different place because it's a different day. The Mk3's design changed quite drastically from the Mk2, even though they're based on the same thing. You got things such as properly shaped headlights rather than just circles or squares. You got body coloured bumpers, except on the very lowest models of Mk3. And they introduced for the first time, the variant is what they called it, but it was the estate model of the Mk3 Golf. Why they didn't do this with Mk2s, I've got no idea. I think it looks really good, and it means you can put more stuff in the back. You also got things such as roof rails, so you can easily attach roof bars to it. So yeah, as you can see, in general, it's a more modern design than the Mark II, but it hasn't quite, you know, it's not quite as modern as the Mark IV, which makes sense because it's in the middle. So when it comes to engines in the Mark III, there was a huge range, much larger than what came in the Mark II. It started at the bottom with a carbureted 1.4, then moved up through a 1.6, 1.8 carb, which is what we've got in this variant here, all the way up to a 2.8 and a 2.9 VR6 engine. In the middle, in the GTI models, you could get an 8-valve 1.8, you could get a 16-valve 1.8, and you could get a 16-valve 2-litre ABF, which is the most desirable of all the engines that were offered. Maybe not so to VR6s, but they're hugely desirable for engine swaps, and you'll see them in a lot of Mark II Golfs, and even some Mark Is. So quickly moving on to the interior of the Mark III, it is more shapely of a dashboard than the Mark II, but you can really see you know, where it all comes from. The glove box is in the same place, the tray in front of the gear sticks in the same place. Once you're sitting there for a while, you sort of get that they're based on the same model. Unfortunately, there wasn't really that many optional extras that you could get on a Mark III that you couldn't get on a Mark II. They still didn't have cup holders in here, other than a pathetic attempt in the glove box. The only one that I've found really is an adjustable steering column that were on the higher end models, but that's it. It's nicer in here, but it's not leaps and bounds ahead of the Mark II, to be honest with you. It does seem very similar once you've sat in here for a while. Right, quick little test drive of the Mark III. I must say it's definitely more comfortable than a Mark II. I know this isn't on standard suspension, but just in the whole like frame of it, it's a lot more comfy. Now, parts availability. These are a real sweet spot where Euro car parts, for example, still stocks all parts for them, but they're also old enough so Heritage have some parts for them as well. Now that can work in its favour, but it also can work against it. For example, like the tuning scene, you know, they're not quite old enough where there's a huge aftermarket. People are reproducing parts for them like Mark IIs, and they're not new enough like Mark IVs where they can like, it's not new enough like a Mark IV where people are buying them, modding them and think they're very cool. People think they're a bit old and not great. So that's not ideal. Let's just go around here. What else is good though is that these can be picked up for an absolute range of prices. So if you're an enthusiast wanting to get into modified cars, I would definitely advise looking at Mark III Golfs. Cheap ones that will last you 2 weeks, that are rotten, you know, maybe a month of MOT left, you're looking like £200–300, you know. Obviously the most expensive ones, like a Mulberry Highline VR6, you know, they're rocking horses, they are. You're not going to find them, you know, they're only available in the 5k and more bracket. But something like this, something like a nice little 1.8 or 1.6 that needs a bit of work but has a year's MOT, you know, you're only looking at 800 to £1,000, maybe 1,200, which puts them in a good category because they're starting to get classic and they're only going to go up in value, and also they're easy to work on like Mark IIs. So you have that, like, you can learn like it's an older car, but you have that a little bit more reliability, like it's a newer car, and you haven't got to bother with fuel injection like you would have to with a Mark IV. So all in all, if I was buying a first class mod, I would definitely pick up a Mark III Golf. So first off, the styling of the Mark II Golf. It has a very 80s wedge shape to it. As you can see, mine's got the square headlights and the small bumpers. Later on in the run, you could get this thing called big bumpers, in which you had a lower piece that hang off here that was body coloured to the car. Some other little things about this one, as you see, it has left-hand drive wipers. That's a bit of the Type 19 that's coming through. As we move round, you can see it also has quarter windows with the later spec Mark IIs. They move the mirror from here to here. This is why a lot of people confuse it with the Mark I Golf. And finally, as we go around the back, as you can see down here, my Volkswagen badge is offset to the left, whereas on the later spec ones, it's central with, it doesn't actually say Volkswagen, it's just this emblem just here. And again, you can see the small bumpers again, and from that angle, you can see the really boxy shape of this. Nothing like the Mark III or 4. Right, so Mark II Golf engines. A lot of people didn't know, in the very first year you could get a 1 litre Mark II Golf, although most of the base spec ones were 1.3s, very common sight on the road. This did go up all the way to a 1.8 GTI 16 valve. That was sort of your top end GTI model, and onwards to the 1.8 G60. That was a supercharged engine that was very rare and only in a very select models. On the diesel side of things, you just get 1.6s. Some were turbo, some were not. They're pretty rare. No one bought them, they were quite expensive. Okay, so here we are on the inside of the Mark II Golf. As you can see in here, it's very much like the outside. Very 80s, you know, blue seats on blue carpet on blue dashboard, like someone, you know, spec this out because they love blue. But you could get them grey on grey on grey, brown on brown on brown. As you get towards the higher GTI models, you could get Recaro seats, a little bit more huggy than these, but not quite as comfortable. And as you can see, you know, the design of the dashboard, it's upright, all squares, you know, all your different switches, they're all squares, you know. Not really, the only circular thing in here is the steering wheel. Absolutely no frills. I've only got 2 speakers in the dash, and that's it. Later models did get them in the doors, but I wasn't lucky enough for this one. So finally, driving experience. Mark II Golf, very rudimentary, very bouncy. Not something you'd really want to daily drive. People do, but then again, people are crazy. So we let the crazy people do what they do. Parts availability. Now, these are, you can't really get parts for these from Eurocar Parts, that sort of parts retailer anymore. You'd have to go to someone who breaks them for parts, or you'd have to go to Europe where they have some places that can still supply parts, or you'd have to go to the Heritage Centre to get them, and obviously then your prices do go up, which is it's a bit annoying. Prices, you're looking at, geez, probably, you know, for a 1.3 that's got MOT and will like be okay, 2.5, 3 grand. You know, they're not cheap anymore. You know, back when I picked this up, it was a very different market, unfortunately. But the thing is, if you are a starter enthusiast and you really want to get your hands dirty, these are great. I mean, as I said, during the Mark III one, the carbed engines are easy to work on. You haven't got to worry about fuel injection or what have you. So these are great. You know, you're obviously missing out on the reliability in that of the Mark IV, but you know, very easy to fix something when something goes wrong. There's nothing to worry about. I mean, well, there obviously is, but you know, it's a very simple car with like 10 wires, and then that's it. So, I guess in conclusion, if you know bits and pieces about mechanics and you have the money and you're happy to drive something that's a little bit more rudimentary, then yeah, get the Mark II. They're fucking cool. If you're a starter, you don't really got your hands dirty too much, get the Mark III. It'll be nice enough that you can daily it, and old enough that you can, you know, you can do bits on it. And finally, if you're looking for something to daily drive and you don't want to touch it too much, you want to just get in and it run and run and run, then get the Mark IV. The Mark IV will run forever, especially if you get one of the PD engines or the 1.8T. They're just amazing. Oh, hello buddy, thank you. Oh. Right guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you coming this far in the video. As you can see, there are many differences between the 2, 3 and 4. There's a bird chirping or having doing something over there. As you can see, there are many differences between them, but also many similarities. If you've enjoyed the video, then please do subscribe. I really do appreciate it. Share the video with your friends. I do try and put out a video every week, so I really appreciate any support. Thank you again.